Have you ever heard of a war where one side was armed with machine guns and the other side was, well, birds? No, this isn't a cartoon plot. This is the real story of the Great Emu War, one of the most bizarre conflicts in history. The year is 1932. The place, Western Australia. The world is in the grips of the Great Depression, and Australian farmers are struggling to make a living. To make matters worse, a new enemy has appeared on the horizon. An army of 20,000 emus. Yes, you heard that right. 20,000 giant, flightless birds had migrated from the interior and discovered a new favorite snack: the farmers' freshly planted wheat crops. These weren't just a few birds pecking at scraps. This was a full-scale invasion. The emus were marching through fields, trampling fences, and devouring everything in their path. The farmers, many of whom were World War I veterans, were desperate. They pleaded with the government for help, and the government, in a decision that would go down in history, decided to declare war. The Minister of Defense, Sir George Pearce, saw this as a golden opportunity. He thought, "We'll send in the army. It'll be great target practice for our soldiers and a fantastic PR stunt." So he dispatched a small contingent from the Royal Australian Artillery. Their commander was Major G.X. P.W. Meredith, a seasoned veteran. Their weapons? 2 state-of-the-art Lewis machine guns and 10,000 rounds of ammunition. Their mission? To wage war on the emu population and put an end to their reign of terror. On paper, this looked like the most one-sided fight in military history. Heavily armed soldiers versus a bunch of overgrown chickens. What could possibly go wrong? As it turns out, everything. The first engagement took place on November 2nd. The soldiers spotted a flock of about 50 emus. They set up their machine guns, took aim, and prepared for an easy victory. But the emus weren't your average, clueless birds. The moment the first shots rang out, they didn't panic and scatter randomly. Instead, they split into small, mobile groups and sprinted away in all directions, making them incredibly difficult targets. The soldiers fired round after round, but the birds were just too fast and too smart. By the end of the day, they had used a significant amount of ammunition to take down maybe a dozen birds. It was a humiliating start. The soldiers quickly realized they had severely underestimated their enemy. Major Meredith noted that each flock seemed to have a leader, a large, black-plumed emu that would stand guard while the others ate. At the first sign of danger, this leader would give a warning call, and the entire flock would scatter before the soldiers could even get a clean shot. The emus were using guerrilla tactics. The military decided to change its strategy. They tried to ambush 1,000 emus near a local dam. This time, they were sure they had them cornered. They set up the machine guns, waited patiently for the birds to get close, and then opened fire. The result was chaos. The first Lewis gun jammed after firing just a few rounds. The emus, startled but not stupid, scattered in every direction, running through the soldiers' lines. The second gunner tried to track them, but couldn't keep up with their zigzagging movements. The great ambush was a total failure. The press started catching wind of this strange war, and the stories were not flattering. Headlines mocked the army's inability to defeat a bunch of birds. One politician in the Australian Parliament sarcastically asked if medals would be awarded for this war. The public found the whole situation hilarious. The army was becoming a laughingstock. Desperate for a win, Major Meredith decided to mount one of the machine guns on the back of a truck. The plan was to chase the emus down and fire on the move. It was a bold idea, but the execution was a disaster. The truck couldn't keep up with the emus on the rough terrain. The ride was so bumpy that the gunner couldn't aim properly. He was bouncing around, trying to get a bead on the birds, who were running faster than the truck could drive. At one point, an emu ran into the truck's steering wheel, causing the driver to swerve and crash into a fence. The truck-mounted machine gun strategy was abandoned. They had been outmaneuvered and outrun. After nearly a week of fighting, the results were pathetic. The army had used thousands of rounds of ammunition to kill a handful of birds. The official numbers are debated, but most reports suggest fewer than 100 emus were killed in the first attempt. Major Meredith was in awe of his opponents. In his official report, he wrote, "If we had a military division with the bullet-carrying capacity of these birds, it would face any army in the world. They can face machine guns with the invulnerability of tanks." He basically called the emus invincible. On November 8th, just 6 days after it began, the first campaign of the Great Emu War was called off. The soldiers packed up their guns and went home defeated. The emus had won the first battle, but the story doesn't end there. The farmers were still under siege, and the emu problem was getting worse. The press continued to mock the government's failure. Under immense pressure, the Minister of Defense ordered a second attempt. Major Meredith and his men were sent back to the front lines later that month. This time, the army had a bit more success. They had learned from their mistakes and adopted more effective tactics. They managed to kill several hundred emus over the next few weeks. But when you're facing an army of 20,000, a few hundred casualties is just a drop in the bucket. The cost in ammunition was still ridiculously high. It was taking, on average, over 10 bullets to kill a single emu. It just wasn't sustainable. By mid-December, the government finally admitted defeat. The military operation was officially ceased. The Great Emu War was over, and the emus were the undisputed champions. The Australian Army, a force that had fought bravely in World War I, had surrendered to a population of flightless birds. So what happened after the war? The government realized that sending soldiers with machine guns wasn't the answer. Instead, they implemented a bounty system, offering rewards to farmers and professional hunters for emu kills. This proved to be far more effective and less embarrassing. Over the next few years, tens of thousands of emus were culled through the bounty system, which finally brought the population under control. The Great Emu War remains one of the strangest and most humorous footnotes in military history. It is a perfect example of how even the most powerful and technologically advanced force can be humbled by nature. It teaches us that you should never, ever underestimate your opponent, especially when that opponent is a 6-foot-tall bird that can run at 30 miles per hour and has the tactical genius of a seasoned general. So the next time you see an emu, show some respect. You're looking at a descendant of a warrior race, the undefeated victors of the Great Emu War. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this bizarre piece of history, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more incredible stories. See you next time.